We appreciate you taking the time to be here and provide your valuable input. We anticipate this presentation is going to take about 30 to 40 minutes. If you haven't signed up for a question and you would like to ask a question tonight, you can visit my colleague Cheyenne in the back. She's raising her hand over there. If you have any friends or family who could not attend tonight, we are recording this session and it should be available on our website later in the week. All right, so just as a reminder, this is the study area map. It includes I-25 from Avenida Cesar Chavez to Lomas Boulevard. The area also includes a broader section to examine environmental impacts. The goal of this study is to improve safety, mobility, and quality of life for all users. We're going to start by going over the welcome packet that you received when you first arrived today. Then the team will review the no-build and build alternatives. We'll go over the level 2B screening and the alternatives advancing. Then we'll talk through how to leave a public comment and open it up to questions. I want to take a quick moment to introduce our presenters tonight. Like I said earlier, my name is Adriana Day, and I am working for the consultant team, part of public involvement for this study, and I'm excited to see such a great turnout tonight.
Thanks, Adriana. My name is Summer Herrera. I am the project development engineer from NMDOT overseeing this study.
Thank you. My name is Mike Worrell. I'm with Horrocks, and I am leading the consultant team that's working for the Department of Transportation and working with Summer on this project.
And I'm Nicole Tolley. I'm the consultant environmental lead. And with that, we'll get started with Summer.
Since we last met in April, the study team has been evaluating data and considering the public input to develop alternatives. We're going to spend the bulk of the presentation on alternatives today, but wanted to show you all how we have arrived at this point. In your welcome packet, we've summarized public input from the last open comment period and provided detailed answers to common questions and comments received. The packet also covers the schedule, the 2A screening that we use to help guide us in the development of the formal alternatives. In the packet at the end, there's also a survey. We'd love for you to fill it out later tonight or at home and submit it to our team as one way to leave a public comment. As we go into the alternatives tonight, we want to spend time on the no-build alternative. We have heard from the public that they would like us to consider a no-build alternative in the last comment period. We've done additional data analysis on this, and we know that it does not solve the problems that we see on I-25 in this area. At the NMDOT, we have a responsibility to provide safe and efficient infrastructure on all state and federal roads, including I-25. So it's important to consider all the options equally as we review the alternatives. We've analyzed the data for the corridor, and we're advancing transportation solutions that improve safety, mobility, and quality of life for all users. We'll talk in detail about the impacts later in the presentation, but I want to start off by saying that the alternatives that we'll be advancing forward do not require any residential relocations. Mike's going to talk more about the no-build alternative now.
Thank you. Like Summer said, we heard an awful lot of input at the last public outreach period about the no-build alternative, so we did spend quite a bit of effort trying to understand what that means, both now and in the future. We always consider the no-build. We're in what's called a NEPA process. That stands for National Environmental Policy Act. And the Federal Highway Administration is the federal agency that has oversight over the interstate highway system as well as the use of federal funds for highway projects such as this. And they also oversee and set guidelines for conducting a NEPA process for this. So I'm going to read directly from this slide about what the no-build means. The no-build alternative is always included as a benchmark against which the impacts of other alternatives can be compared. As part of the no-build alternative, short-term minor construction, such as safety upgrades and maintenance, can be considered. Again, that's from the Federal Highway Administration. So go a little bit trying to define what that ultimately means, because no build is not exactly completely nothing. But what it does not include is new facilities and new configurations. It doesn't include new biking and walking facilities. It wouldn't include any noise abatement features like noise walls. And it would not include any changes or improvement to the access to and from the freeway. The no-build alternative would only replace existing infrastructure as it would need replacing, such as the bridges and pavement as it gets aged and needs replacement. The no-build would not necessarily mean there would not be any construction on the freeway. It would require ongoing maintenance, of course. And as the aging infrastructure needs replacement, and many of the bridges are at the point where they're nearing that, now that would need to be replaced, but it would be replaced in similar configurations as it is today. Construction impacts would be present associated with that as those replacements would occur. So it isn't like there's no construction or ongoing maintenance or improvements that would be needed in order to keep the facilities working. As with any replacement of any existing bridges or infrastructure or any of the build alternatives, the department does not have any funding identified for this at this time. So the timing of any of those replacements with a no build or any of the other alternatives is not known. So based again on a lot of the public input, we did a substantial analysis on the no build and what that would mean over time. And if nothing is done to change the configuration of the freeway and the ramps, that we do expect to see substantial increases in travel times to and from destinations. We expect to see substantial increases in commute times along I-25. We expect to see a substantial increase in crashes occur as a consequence of the no build. And then as that congestion increases on the freeway, we would also expect to see the local city road network affected, as well as motorists and drivers and users of the freeway find alternative routes to get around the congestion. So we would see congestion increasing on the local streets as well. This next slide is very similar to a number of boards that are out kind of in this corner of the lobby, just outside the doors. This is just one example, and it's kind of a representative sample, but we analyzed travel times using our travel operations model, our traffic operations model, and we projected traffic out to year 2050 using the Mr. Cog's travel demand model. And then we analyzed how that would operate. Today, and this is just a representative sample, it takes approximately 5.3 minutes to travel from the Rio Bravo interchange to the I-40 interchange in the northbound direction in the morning. We expect that time to increase up to about 21.2 minutes by year 2050 because of that increased congestion. And then we also show the comparative travel times of each of the build alternatives that we'll go over here in a minute. And those are quite comparable to what the travel times are today. This would be in 2050, but basically in the 4.6 to 4.9 minute range for that same trip. And again, there's a number of boards out there representing a number of different origins and destinations and what the representative travel times would be for those. Then we also analyzed safety. We performed a predictive safety analysis that's basically following a methodology driven by the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. And in there, they provide a methodology for predicting the number of crashes. Today, typically what we're seeing through the study area is about 173 crashes a year. If nothing is done, no improvements are made to the facilities, we would expect that to increase up to about 296 crashes per year for the same section. So crashes would increase. And then this next slide, we basically show what the different levels of improvement would be under each of the build alternatives that we analyzed as well. We see those range, in the case of alternative E, 51% reduction from the no build in year 2050. Alternative G, we would expect to see about a 39% reduction in crashes in the year 2050. Alternative J, about a 50% reduction, and alternative L, about a 42% reduction in crashes over that at that same year. So through that, we concluded that that the no build does not meet the purpose and need as we've developed and defined. And if you participated in previous meetings, we spent quite a lot of time presenting what we saw as the purpose and need for improvements. Namely, that had to do with improving safety by reducing crashes, and then improving traffic operations to meet the growing travel demand and the future travel demand. And so from that, from the analysis and the results that we presented out in the lobby primarily, that we determined that the no build really does not meet that purpose and need. So the build alternatives, I'm going to spend a bit of time describing these, and it is very hard to describe these and have you see them from the screen. There are boards just right outside that door going along the back of this wall that show each of the alternatives that we evaluated and analyzed. They are E, G, J, and L. And then there were basically of those four alternatives, we're proposing to forward only two alternatives that are much larger scale, and they're laid out horizontal on the tables out there. They're a lot easier to see. So invite you to do that because it's going to be a little bit hard to describe from here. In these build alternatives, in past meetings, if you participated in the last meeting, we talked about three different elements of the highway infrastructure. We talked about active transportation modes and bicycles and pedestrians. We talked about options for the alignment of the corridor, and we also talked about options for what we called interstate exchange, or basically how you travelers get on and off the freeway. And what we have done since that time, if you remember and you participated, we've proposed to forward some of those options, a handful of those options of both. We did some additional work and we actually screened some from back in June to now, either because on technical basis that we couldn't get them to work, or that in some cases some were overly impactful over other alternatives but presented no benefit with those impacts. So we were able to screen some of that. So in this, we have a set of improvements that are recommending with each of the build alternatives for active transportation modes. And then we forwarded two options for the freeway alignment, and then two options for the interstate exchange, or how you get on and off the freeway. And then that combined into four permutations, so that's resulted in the four alternatives essentially. For non-motorized transportation, each one of the city streets that cross the I-25 corridor serves an important role in the bicycle and pedestrian travel in the community. And each one of them are highlighted on the city's non-motorized transportation plan that's adopted and is currently being updated. And so each of those cross streets are very important to making that connectivity and staying true to that plan. In addition, there is a real need for improvement. We found that the safety experience for both bicyclists and pedestrians, there is a higher than what you would typically see on similar facilities bicycle crash experience, and also a higher vehicle pedestrian crash experience than is seen normally. Not that that's ever a good thing, but there's even a higher level of that along each one of these cross streets in the intersections with the frontage roads. So there is a need there. And at each one of these cross streets, in these alternatives, we're proposing to include a separated pathway that combines both pedestrians and bicyclists on each side of the road, 14 feet wide, that is separated with a concrete wall barrier from the vehicular traffic on each side of each of these cross streets. That would be carried through the corridor and then basically connected up, matching the cross-sectional elements that's contained in the city's non-motorized transportation plan, so matching those back in once we get away from the freeway. So that's included with each of the build alternatives, is a 14-foot wide trail on either side. And a lot of that has come from our interaction over the last few years with advocacy groups in the bicycle and trail community in Albuquerque. So, and then in here, there's going to be a number of details. We're proposing to include a number of ways for how those sections would transition back to those adopted planned facilities for along those roadways. And that's going to be a combination of crosswalks, what's called bike boxes. If you're not familiar with them, they're a special treatment for which bicycles get an isolated place away from the traffic to make their decisions and make their crossings. And then, again, widen paths through the intersections. So each one of the build alternatives contain those improvements. Then for the freeway infrastructure, the ramps and the mainline freeway, there were two options that we forwarded and combined into these alternatives. One is a westerly shift, which shifts the freeway section to the west in the lead and coal area, and then an easterly shift, which shifts the freeway to the east, kind of in the area of the Albuquerque Public Schools property where the mural is in that area. And then there were two configurations of ramps that were developed from the last meeting. One is a system of what we call braided ramps. It's a little bit of a jargony term, and there's some examples of it around the city, but it's where the off-ramp for one interchange crosses over or under the on-ramp from the adjacent interchange, and you don't have weaving that occurs in auxiliary lanes or in the through lanes between the two intersections. There is two of those alternatives, one in the westerly shift and one in the easterly shift, that include braided ramp infrastructure between Avenida Cesar Chavez and Cole. In those alternatives, there is a conversion of the existing braided ramp system on the southbound direction between Central and Ladd, and that would be replaced with an extension of the frontage road, and then on the northbound side, it would include a removal of the on-ramp that's just northbound, just north of Ladd. And so if you're going to access this central area through either one of these braided ramp options, in the northbound direction, you get off, to get off at Cole, you'll go through the braided ramp to get off at Cole, and then you can extend on the frontage road system all the way to the existing ramp between Martin Luther King and Lomas. Then in the southbound direction, to access the area, you get off at the ramp between Lomas and Martin Luther King, and then get back on south of Cole to the braided ramps there. The other alternative is similar to what was forwarded in the last, or the other option was similar to what was forwarded in the last planning study from 2016. It includes a simplification of the ramps, primarily a closure of and a removal of the ramp southbound from Cole. So you would not be able to access southbound I-25 from Cole with that. If you were going to access southbound I-25, you would do it through the ramp that exists in that current configuration south of Central. Other than that, it maintains all the other ramps. It does include the addition of a U-turn, or an advanced U-turn, we call them here. Most people think of them as Texas turnarounds at Central, so you can access that southbound on-ramp south of Central. So those 4 permutations, there's a westerly shift with one configuration, and a westerly shift with the other ramp configuration. Then there's an easterly shift with one configuration and another one with the other ramp configuration. That's a lot easier to describe as we're standing at the boards or at the thing. So forgive me for that, but it's a little bit complicated to describe from the screen. And with that, I turn it over to Nicole.
All right, thanks, Mike. So during this phase, we conducted level 2B screening. There are 3 parts to this screening, but the first that I want to talk through is purpose and need, and Mike talked about that a little bit earlier. The information for our purpose and need screening is located at Station 2, if you'd like to see more detailed information there. So to evaluate the effectiveness of each alternative, we assessed how well it addressed the purpose and need. So we conducted detailed safety and traffic analysis to determine if an alternative reduced crashes and average delays, if it maintained appropriate speeds, if it decreased travel times, if it replaced aging infrastructure and enhanced non-motorized transportation options. So in the end, we wanted to know, does the alternative sufficiently address the purpose and need? So we used similar scoring to the last public meeting. It's a 5-point scale ranging from best with 2 green check marks to worst with 2 red X's. And the results of our analysis is the no-build alternative did not meet the purpose and need, but it will be carried forward as a benchmark against which the impacts of the other build alternatives can be compared. All 4 build alternatives did meet the purpose and need as they all substantially reduced crashes and improved traffic operations. We then next evaluated alternatives on how well they minimized impacts to environmental resources. So we quantified impacts to historic buildings that are on or likely eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. We looked at impacts to neighborhood blocks with underserved communities, residential relocations, non-residential building relocations, community resources like parks, and Section 4 of properties, which include historic properties and recreational areas. And like purpose and need scoring, we used a 5-point scale that ranged from best to worst. And then at Station 3 in the lobby, there's more information about that screening process. So the no-build alternative had no impacts since we wouldn't be making any improvements. Alternatives E and G, which are the west shifts, had the most impacts to environmental resources, including the most impacts to historic buildings, the most impacts to neighborhood blocks with underserved communities, the highest number of residential relocations, the highest number of Section 4 of impacts. Alternative G did have the lowest number of non-residential relocations. Alternatives J and L, the east shifts, best minimized impacts to environmental resources with the lowest impact to historic buildings, minimal impacts to neighborhoods with underserved communities. There's some minor strip acquisitions, no residential relocations, and the lowest impact to Section 4 of properties. Alternative J and L do not relocate any residential properties. The major difference between alternatives J and L is J has greater impacts to the APS property, as well as the relocation of 2 additional commercial properties when compared to alternative L. And then finally, we conducted a cumulative impact analysis. And this information is available at Station 5 in the lobby. Typically, we would do this type of analysis in a future phase with only the preferred alternative. However, we received some public input at the last couple of public outreach efforts, and where we recognize that the original construction of I-25 in the 1960s substantially impacted and divided this community. And so we wanted to account for these impacts as part of our Level 2B screening. We evaluated whether or not an alternative would cause further harm to the community, or if an alternative could provide opportunities to help mitigate some of the impacts in the past. So we looked at various resources here, including neighborhood and residential impacts, non-residential impacts, noise mitigation, non-motorized transportation, and impacts to minority and low-income populations. And so some key takeaways from that analysis concluded that the no-build alternative offered no opportunities to improve upon past impacts, including looking at noise mitigation like noise walls, or providing non-motorized transportation facilities to connect across I-25. Alternatives E and G, which again are the west shifts, would have additional impacts, including additional residential and non-residential relocations, greater impacts to minority and low-income populations, and would likely increase noise levels with I-25 moving closer to residential neighborhoods on the west side. These alternatives would provide those opportunities to improve those non-motorized connections across I-25. And then alternatives J and L, which are again the east shifts, would have no additional residential relocations or impacts to minority and low-income populations. It would have additional impacts to non-residential buildings, but it provides that opportunity to improve non-motorized transportation connections across I-25, and would likely decrease noise levels by moving I-25 further away from the residential properties on the west side. All right, so based on this analysis, the study team has identified alternatives that will be moved forward for further analysis. And as a reminder, we're following the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, which requires agencies to demonstrate and document that we ultimately identified an alternative that best avoids and minimizes environmental impacts while meeting the transportation needs. So alternatives J and L will move forward for further analysis because they best met the purpose and need while minimizing impacts to environmental resources. And as we shared earlier, the no-build alternative will also be carried forward as a benchmark to compare against the build alternatives. So build alternative J, actually, before we get into that, so at the end of this presentation and at the end of the Q&A session, we're going to include some additional information, some additional boards that describe alternatives J and L, as well as some additional score plots. While we flip the room, if you could go back into the auditorium, you can take a look at the stations 1 through 5. So as a reminder, alternative J is an east shift alignment alternative. On the screen here, you can see we're labeling some of the ramp locations and key features in the study area. This alternative does have the most impacts to commercial businesses on the east side. So in summary, build alternative J meets the purpose and need while minimizing impacts to environmental and community resources. It would not include any residential relocations. It has the lowest number of impacts to historic buildings in Section 4 of properties, has minimal impacts to neighborhood blocks with underserved communities, but it does have the highest number of non-residential relocations. Similarly, alternative L also shifts to the east, but it is less impactful to the APS property and other businesses. And this is the alternative that includes the advanced U-turn at Central Avenue. So alternative L also meets the purpose and need while minimizing impacts to environmental and community resources. It would not include any residential relocations. It has the lowest number of impacts to historic buildings in Section 4 of properties, and has minimal impacts to neighborhood blocks with underserved communities, some minor strip acquisitions. It differs from alternative J in that alternative L impacts fewer non-residential properties on the east side of I-25. All right, so what comes next? So we need your input today and over the next month. The NMDOT is still evaluating all the data, but once a decision is reached, the study team will identify a preferred alternative based on public input and the data analysis and finalize the alternatives analysis study. So from there, the team will prepare an environmental study that will ultimately be reviewed by state and federal agencies, and we anticipate that environmental document being finalized by late 2025.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you to all of our presenters. I'm going to talk about how you can leave a public comment. So as you know, today kicks off our formal public comment period, which is open through January 6th. So what does this mean? This means that you, as a member of the public, have the opportunity to give us information and input about what you think about what we've presented tonight. All of those comments will be considered and put into report at the end of the study. So how can you do this? It starts off with the surveys you received up front. You can also fill these surveys in online, or you can give us a call, you can email us, you can visit our website and fill out the survey online, or you can even mail us a comment if you want to. All right, let's jump into the Q&A. If you haven't already and you would like to make a public comment, you can sign up with my colleague Cheyenne in the back. She's raising her hand over there. Let's review a few guidelines. We ask that you keep your questions down to 1 minute. We understand if you would like to ask more than one question, we can always come back to you if we have time at the end of the Q&A. You are going to be given a number. Please state your number before you start asking your question or leaving your comment. That way we can record who actually asked the question. And then, of course, be respectful to those asking questions, leaving comments, and to those of us who will be answering those questions. Let's get started. Question number 1.
I want to say higher speed on the freeway means more fatalities. We don't need to be increasing the speed. What will happen in the surrounding neighborhoods as the large ramps built for a higher speed impede on their lives and properties? It's good to know you aren't relocating people, but you know there are impacts. Instead of expanding the highways and increasing the speed, the Department of Transportation needs to pivot to increasing bus routes, building rail across state, and better and safer options for pedestrians and bikers. It is clear the projected data is very subjective to how the city and traffic grows, which just can't be predicted linearly. There's no way this takes into account all the subjective factors at hand. The travel demand model doesn't encompass it. Also, decreasing crashes is not the same as reducing fatalities of the crashes, which higher speeds are more fatal. No build option, you're saying you can't improve biking and pedestrian infrastructure, but this should be improved regardless of what happens to the highway. Around Cesar Chavez and I-25, there's a lack of this. This should be improved, and we should be upgrading and upkeeping the infrastructure that we have, improving pedestrian and bike infrastructure instead of expanding the highways. It's good to see you're going with no residential relocations, but it's very undemocratic to write off no build when you admit that the public supports it.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm number 2. They told me to say that. I'm okay with giving my name, though. My name is Kyron. The increased travel times presupposes that Albuquerque stays car-centric. If NMDOT cares about safety and traffic, they'd invest every last penny that they're giving into Horrocks, into our public transit system. We need a robust transit system. So NMDOT needs to put their focus on building a more robust transit system for the people of Albuquerque. And then during the resource impacts, it was interesting because I think that the environmental impacts, when they're evaluated, should also include the pollution due to cars and what they emit. This includes car tires, and so PAHs, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, should be considered with the environmental evaluation, because inducing demand for more cars isn't going to be environmentally friendly. So we shouldn't be doing highway expansion. It's crazy to me. It's ridiculous. So although some of those build options don't displace people, they're still going to impact our community. So I think we need to keep the no build option. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Cynthia. I have number 3. Yeah, so you guys talked about the no build option and why it's just something like people are interested in, but you're not going to do, and how it excludes a lot of these things that are beneficial that I imagine people are on board with, specifically in the neighborhoods when we talk about like sound walls, these kind of protective boxes for people so that they can have safer pedestrian like walkways and stuff like that and actually utilize them. I guess my biggest question is why that has to come with a highway expansion and why those things can't just be implemented without that. Like, why can't our infrastructure be maintained like it's been said that it is something that is going to have to be replaced, it's going to have to be maintained, but why does like all these other features that would actually help the community, that I imagine that the benefits the community can't be done without an expansion of the highway? That actually a lot of studies show that while immediately it might shorten those travel times that you guys showed, which I'm actually interested in also knowing the time frame of which those travel times actually exist, because studies do show that later on actually the traffic comes back and then it kind of is like this cycle of we're going to expand the highway, and then, the traffic comes back, we're going to expand the highway, and why can't we just maintain those things, do the things that like they're talking about, expand public transportation, and also the ability for people to have like these pedestrian walkways so they can bike and they can walk, which actually would reduce the traffic as well. Why does that have to come with an expansion?
Thank you. Number 4, you don't need to say your names. If you want to just say number 4.
So hi, I grew up on this side of town. I've lived here all my life, and I have family that lives like in Huning Highlands, and just to see the 60 years of the impacts from this highway has been very kind of upsetting, honestly, to think about. But the problem is Albuquerque kind of grew around this highway. It was built, and we grew economic development around it, but now it's become our detriment in some ways because it just funnels car traffic into it, and that's a lot of route for most people to like go across town, and like everyone is saying, just expanding it isn't going to be a worthwhile investment at all. It's been observed widely all across the country and everywhere else. It's actually like a well-observed economic theory called induced demand, or the Bayes paradox, just where if you're not improving other viable modes that are scalable and expandable within the same space, then it's going to make car traffic worse perpetually, no matter how much lanes you add. So I'm glad for these improvements that might happen, that it looks like you guys want to really help and mitigate the impacts of this highway, but we need a lot, like those other viable options aren't very viable for most people, because people don't want to bike next to traffic that is going 30 miles per hour with no separation, and crossing the interchanges are very, just scary to most people. They're very daunting, and some people have gotten used to it, but it just needs to be a viable option. So that needs to be invested in no matter what, and it needs to be mitigated with those underpasses. But this all just needs to be thought about holistically. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Hi, I'm number 5, and I live in Huning Highland. And first of all, I want to say I agree with 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those were all great arguments that were made. And I just want to reiterate that we're not opposed to upgrades for pedestrian and bicycle safety, or for noise abatement, or for other positive improvements. However, we are really firmly against expanding the footprint and expanding the lanes, both on frontage roads and on the highway. We're definitely against that. And we understand that bridges need to be replaced and maintained. So what we want is the best. We want the no-build plus the upgrades for pedestrian safety, and combined with rather than expanding the footprint and the lanes, expand the options for reducing speed through the corridor by some things that I'm not really qualified to talk about, but for example, speed cameras. We know speed cameras work, and the common answer is, well, you can't have those on the interstate. Well, I think we can figure that out somehow. So we think the safety issue could be addressed by reducing speeds, and thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Hi, good evening. I'm number 6. I am a downtown resident, a member of Strongtown's ABQ. I work at UNM, and I've spent the last 15 years going underneath I-25 on a bike almost every day. Those right turn lanes included in every one of the alternatives are often where those right hook collisions happen. So I would love to see any type of right turn lane eliminated to international standards. But one thing I noticed going through these alternatives was that the parallel rail runner corridor wasn't taken into account in any of these analyses. And I know FHWA and other federal data collection protocols often don't include that, but that's been a known failure to the extent that CalDOT is now looking into transit when they do highway projects. A recent CalDOT project upgraded Caltrain on the San Francisco Peninsula. That improvements increased frequency to several times an hour. The trains are at speed with cars, and riderships increased 50%. The best way to fight congestion is to just give people good alternatives. Looking into it myself, I found that the New Mexico Legislative Finance Committee researched Rail Runner this year and found for the cost of $185 million, we could have hourly Rail Runner on dual track across 97 miles of corridor versus the 600 to 700 million we're spending on 7 miles in Albuquerque on one road. So why aren't we including these alternatives in this larger, holistic, regional scale? And then secondly, how are these traffic numbers that are being projected taking into account that psychology of when a corridor becomes congested, more people are likely to use alternatives like Rail Runner? Because I simply don't know that 21 minutes from Sunport to the Big I is going to be very realistic even in 2050. And I do hope that those population figures, those are optimistic. I hope they come true. But I don't know that I necessarily buy it. So my question would be, include the larger regional corridor, including the Rail Runner in this study and those impacts.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm number 7.
Okay.
I want to echo what number 6 said about how it feels like the philosophy of how we're attacking this problem is stuck in the 20th century, and we're in the 21st century. And it feels like we're looking at everything like it's the 90s, and the only option we have is a highway, and make a highway bigger, make a highway bigger. But I think we're smarter than that. We've learned terrible lessons from this history that we have of highway expansion. And I think we're at an opportunity here for us to really look toward the future and help Albuquerque become a model for other cities in the future by looking at alternatives considering upgrades to the rail runner to improve these corridors. I also am a first responder, and I was really confused about the need is to increase safety by reducing crashes, but that does not talk about mortality. And not all crashes are made equal. Safety should be improving and preserving human life. I personally would much rather get in a fender bender going 45 miles an hour than get in a deadly crash at 75 miles an hour. I work in a helicopter and I respond to crashes on 75 miles an hour. Rarely do those people survive or do they have good quality of life afterward. I don't respond in a helicopter to people going 45 miles an hour. So that felt like a great oversight, and I would love to have more details on these safety measures, because just because you got in a crash doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a poor outcome. Let's think about humans and survivability. Thank you.
Hi, I'm number 8, and I thought I was going to be saying something original, but everybody who's gone before me has really touched on all the points. This gentleman came up with a figure of 600,000 or 700,000, but I multiplied the estimate from 2016 by the FHWA Road Construction Index, and I got a number of north of 500 million. And so when you were doing these alternatives, when you were looking at no build versus the build alternatives and the impact on travel time, did you take that $500 million and incorporate that into transportation alternatives that would have an impact on the generation of car traffic? So it seems to me, on the one hand, you're taking these build alternatives that are going to cost upward of $500 million, and then you're looking at the no build, but you're not taking any of that $500 million and doing anything to change the transportation patterns in the area. So our group, Bike ABQ, was proposing sort of what we were referring to as an enhanced no build, where we put the resources that would have gone into the highway into alternative transportation alternatives. In the past, we've discussed putting automated speed enforcement or speed cameras on the interstate. It's not currently. Back in 2010, the State Highway Commission said that they weren't going to use them on state and federal highways. I've talked to the Secretary of the DOT, and they are proposing to the governor to reintroduce speed cameras on the state and state-administered federal highways. So I hope you'll be willing to go back and reassess your no-build alternative incorporating speed cameras if and when that gets passed by the State Highway Department of Transportation.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm number 9, and I think echoing a lot of the comments made so far regarding the no build versus the other options. So I'd be curious to hear from you all specifically how you got some of the numbers for the estimates by 2050 for the no build compared to the other options. While you were showing that, I was doing some back of the envelope calculations based on the previous population increase in the Albuquerque metro area compared to the numbers you were showing. And by 2050, I was calculating that based on the past 10 years of growth, we'd be seeing a little more than the 10% population increase in the metro area. And then the numbers you were showing was indicating more of a 3 to 4 times population increase. And that's assuming every single person who's moving to Albuquerque is now going to be driving on the I-25 S-curve area, which I guess the methodology behind that I have a lot of questions about. And then in addition to the fact that there's other alternatives, so improving the rail runner, improving public transit, improving biking and walking infrastructure in the city that could alleviate some of that traffic congestion for a fraction of the cost. And yeah, so I guess all that's to say I'd be interested to hearing about the methodology behind how you did some of that analysis for the no build, because, I guess for me, I worry that due diligence hasn't been done to justify this expansion compared to some of the other alternatives that would be much better for the health and safety of Albuquerque residents by improving rail or public transit or what have you. So appreciate it.
I can answer a couple questions.
Yeah.
And then the folks that actually did the analysis are here and will be out at the boards and answering questions after, so you can ask as many questions as you want about how their analysis went. But as far as the basis for travel demand, that comes from the Mr. Coggs, the regional planning organization, and their development of a travel demand model, which is the basis of long-term planning. And in there, that model takes into account population growth, employment growth, and projects on what the outcomes will be for travel demand on the network, on all elements of the network throughout the city, and that's what was used as a basis for the projections.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. I'll ask more questions later.
Yeah, the folks that did the analysis are here, so have at it.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, it's me, number 10. If the point of what we're doing here is to reduce travel times, really, I mean, I haven't seen anything that has sufficiently eased my mind about induced demand. We know that adding travel lanes doesn't work. We know that expanding highways is just a dead end at the end of the day. And really, if we want to reduce travel times and reduce traffic, we should just reduce the number of people in their cars. If you're saying that no build is no longer an option, then let's build some other stuff. Let's build different transportation options. Let's put that money into the areas that you say are going to be impacting both safety and travel times, not into highway expansion. And also the speed camera thing, very good to know. We should continue to push for that.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Commute time. Good evening. I am number 11. I really welcome hearing all the comments before me from the speakers. Great comments, great observations, great recommendations. You have a difficult task before you because you are trying to solve 75 years worth of problems and looking towards the future 50, 100 years down the road, because by the time you get started, and major infrastructure changes are going to occur in 50 years. So we have to start looking much more towards the future and address a couple things that I have not heard yet addressed. The first one, can I ask you to call up slide for option K or 11, please? And on K and 11, if I understood it correctly, what you're looking at pushing the S-curve towards the east side, not eliminating the S-curve, but you are slightly minimizing the S-curve if I look at that illustration there. So one of the questions that I have, and something that I recommended at last year's meeting regarding this and put together PowerPoint slides for your team, I never heard back on, is why aren't we eliminating the S-curve altogether? By instead of just slightly moving everything to the east, drawing a straight line, if I may use a laser pointer here, there we go. Somewhere starting here from Central Avenue, where's the laser pointer? There it is. Somewhere in the downtown area around Central, and doing a straight line all the way down to Gibson and all the way down to the airport, right through all this commercial and government section land here. This eliminates the S-curve altogether. You got a straight line shot, no curves. It eliminates the safety concerns. We eliminates the speed concerns. And now you got a straight line shot. So from point A to point B, you got a straight line. That's your best route. So that's one thing. I'm trying to understand why you haven't made a straight line shot. If you're going to eliminate an S-curve, eliminate it. Don't pussyfoot around it. The second comment that I have is, do you have an aerial map of Albuquerque?
Not here.
Okay. So the second issue that was volume of traffic and projecting the amount of volume of traffic that's going to increase over the years on I-25. Part of the issue that we're having is that we are a major hub for interstate travel for commercial vehicles, I-40 corridor especially. So in order to go southbound or from southbound to I-40, all the traffic has got to go through I-25 to the Big I and then onto I-40. So one of my recommendations that I haven't heard being addressed is why don't we build a bypass from the Harris Canyon through Kirtland Air Force Base Arroyo and exit at Chavez. This way all the traffic that has to go south on I-25 doesn't have to go downtown, doesn't have to go through the city, gets rerouted completely through Kirtland Air Force Base, exit at Chavez, and bypasses this area and reduces the congestion.
Okay.
But, so eliminate the traffic, don't expand the amount of volume that you're going to handle, just have it redirected because they don't want to be here anyways.
Okay, we should talk after. Thank you.
Hello, I'm number 12, and I wear a couple different hats. I just joined Strong Towns. I belong to Huning Highland Neighborhood Association. I've restored 5 historic homes in that area, and I have a house there. And I'm also an urban designer and architect. The one thing I'd like to put out for a challenge for all of you is to consider the ITT context-sensitive design manual. We got Ike Benton, to our city councilor, to adopt that, and I don't know if it did get into NMODT, but it doesn't get used very often. So to see if there were physical design things that would slow the traffic down through the S. I know people have talked about cameras, but what I have found in my expertise going across the United States redesigning roadways is physical design is everything. So straightening out the curve is actually an issue. It increases traffic speeds. And vertical elements, maybe sound walls, I don't really know, I haven't gone through the ITT to apply it to this situation, but please check the ITT manual and see if there are some physical design manifestations to slow traffic down, because just a sign that says 55, I think it's mounted at Central, no one pays any attention to it, and they don't brake until they hit the S-curve. So the S-curve is actually a very effective slowing mechanism. So if there was some way to balance the safety and the slowing there, I think that's a good thing. The other thing I'd remind you is trying to get more cars faster through that is not the object, especially when it goes through 2 historic neighborhoods. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it.
Number 13. So the frontage road intersection that I have the most experience with is Locust and MLK. And we see near daily accidents at that intersection because people come off the highway at 70. They continue going 70 miles per hour on Locust, blow the red light, and T-bone someone at MLK. If we're lucky. If we're not lucky, they hit a pedestrian. And that makes it kind of a scary intersection to be walking around. So I don't really see anything here that's kind of addressing that specific aspect. I mean, if you're running a red light, there's no sign you can post that's going to get people to stop running a red light. So I don't know if.
I mean, you still have the traffic signals, correct?
Yeah, and if people ignore them, I guess the only option is to get rid of that I-25 exit. So I don't really know what to do with that.
Okay.
You guys are the experts, but I just wanted to make sure we were cognizant of the number of accidents
safety issue, yeah, and there is one.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, number 14 here. Many people before me talked about the same concerns I have. And well, I'm a pedestrian, I'm a driver, I'm a cyclist. I move around the city every way I can. And I'm concerned about the connectivity between neighborhoods, and not only west and east, but also north and south. And I see a good possibility to, it's not New Mexico Department of Transit, but to decrease car congestion with public transportation and improve active transportation alternatives. And about these alternatives, the projects, I was precisely concerned about the widening intersections, and because this is where pedestrians get killed and cyclists get killed with turn-on reds and wide intersections that sometimes a person with disability is not able to cross the street on time. So it might be something to think about as well. And I come from Brazil, and in São Paulo, 17 million inhabitant city, they decreased the speed to the Tietê and Marginal Pinheiros, two highways that make a ring in the city. They decreased from 50 miles per hour to 45 miles per hour. And there is a report from Department of Transit that at that time, it was 2013, and they decreased congestion. São Paulo was the 8th most congested city in the world, and after this change, it was the 58th most congested city in the world. So sometimes we can look to other cities and other alternatives around the world to see this project. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. Here we are a year later. I see you guys again. And a lot of it's already been covered, the holistic perspective. We mentioned that there's no impact to non-residentials in the last two options, which, being statistically, maybe when you look at the perspective of a community as a whole, that's probably true. But as an individual who lives on Lotus, on Silver, literally, I can walk in seconds to the highway. I've seen the two options, and I guess I'm only speaking from my micro perspective. When I bought the house 2 years ago, I was okay with the current level of traffic. But the configuration right now, the way things are going, I've seen, what did number 13 mention? Lomas off-ramp and the Martin Luther King off-ramp. There's no residential there. It's all commercial. So you can't say there's not going to be an impact, but for this little group of people who live in that neighborhood, in those few houses that possibly you might have, I forgot which option it was, one of the two where they showed the frontage road coming all the way through. Am I going to be looking at cars similar to Martin Luther King and Lomas for my backyard? This is something that concerns me. And again, there's no option to relocate in any of these two. And I really don't want to be looking at cars flying by my house. I mean, literally, that's my main concern. Okay. If you please look at the possibility of relocations, because in that instance, we are very, very close to this, myself and my neighbors in that area. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Appreciate it.
Hello, number 16 here. So looking at this, I think that it's great getting rid of the S-curve. I personally will never get on that freeway because I cannot deal with that S-curve. Making it the way that people are talking about, and I didn't hear all the comments, I apologize. I was looking at the drawings. I like the idea that once we are able to get these paths safer and you have the underpasses for the pedestrians and people with disabilities, I think that's an amazing idea. We need more of that. we keep saying that nobody's going to be relocated. However, my question is maybe those of us who live in houses and our homes are not going to be relocated. What is going to happen to the homeless people who are living underneath the freeway? You know, I mean, are we going to be able to, yes, this is supposed to slow down people and save on crashes and save on travel time. However, you know, God be willing, in 2050, we're going to have flying cars and we're not going to be worried about this, okay? So that's my hope. But in the reality is right now, today, I live right next to the freeway. I see the traffic. I hear it all day, all night, whatever. You get used to it. But right behind my house are some homeless people. So when I first moved in, I had to be concerned when I saw the fires, are they going to burn down the house? Now I look for the fire to make sure they haven't frozen to death. So that is where my question is, how is this really going to affect our community? And how can we open this up as something more positive? Because I see this as a huge positive step forward to get rid of that S-curve. Because when you look at those drawings, blueprints is the word I was thinking.
Okay.
You can see where the S-curve is straightened out more. And I think that that's huge because I think that's what causes a lot of these crashes. You hit that S-curve going too fast, it's just bad. I've done it. I've actually had to slam on my brake not realizing that that curve was just going to flip me. And the traffic, if we straighten that out, if you can get the truckers to have their own 2 inner lanes or outer lanes to where they can go right through the city, and all the rest of us come and go and on and off our ramps, and all the pedestrians are going under and they're safe, I see that as a huge plus. I think this is a great start. That's just where I'm at. But I do think that there are a lot of people that are not really being thought about. And that's where I'm at. That's all. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. How many do we have? Do you know?
Hey, good evening. 17.
Okay.
So I drove on I-25 to get here. I did not want to drive on I-25 to get here. I wanted to take the rail runner. But I couldn't because I came from Santa Fe. To get home, I can't take that, right? It stops. It's already ended for the night from Albuquerque to Santa Fe. So to me, I'm one of those people that would not have taken the highway. I would not have added to that congestion if the rail runner went longer, did more. So another thing is, I'm new to New Mexico. Like, I just moved here this month, right? So, well, November. I guess it's already December. So, where I'm from Detroit, right? The Motor City. And in Detroit, they are currently, like even I think tonight, in a meeting talking about removing a highway, a downtown busy highway, right? So if the Motor City can have these discussions about removing a highway, why does Albuquerque, New Mexico, why do we have to have discussions about adding lanes? It just really doesn't make sense to me. So I don't know how, I came a little late, so because I came from Santa Fe, so I didn't get to see much of the presentation. So I don't know if you've looked at those other cities like Rochester, like Detroit, that are actively, like Rochester's already removed one of their highways, Detroit's removing theirs. Why are we expanding when we should be either keeping the same or removing? Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to reiterate something that was mentioned earlier. The S-curve was designed specifically to slow down traffic, and the presentation in the lobby is saying that the project will lower traffic accidents. Well, this project is suggesting that not only should traffic speeds be increased, but also straighten out the S-curve. And like I mentioned previously, the S-curve is an engineering design to slow down traffic. It seems like we have a contradiction here, somehow increasing traffic speeds and eliminating engineering design that forces people to slow down makes traffic more safe. I'm just wondering how this contradiction is going to be squared out. Also, the general contractor for the Project Summit, they're an out-of-town contractor, so they're not going to increase job opportunities for locals here. So I don't believe any notions that this will increase temporary employment increases here for locals. Thank you.
Thank you. 19?
Hi, I'm number 19. I'm Ben Bean. I have a few questions, and if you want to answer them now, that's great. The first one is, are there any plans to show a side-by-side of the impact to safety for fatality or for vehicle collisions and the impact to safety for emissions from this? Can we have a side-by-side of those two?
So, yeah, I don't know if you want to answer it, but in the next stage of that, when we want the full analysis of air quality and other impacts, this is a comparative analysis between these alternatives meant to screen them, or reduce the number. But yeah, there's a full analysis that will be done.
Awesome. That is good to hear. Thank you.
Okay.
And the second question was the model for increased traffic utilization of the highway. I don't know what the right word is. Let's call it that. Does that model include the positive feedback from the increased throughput capacity of the highway?
Yeah, it actually responds to the planned improvements, and it actually assumes the planned improvements. And again, the guy that did the modeling is here as well, and he can probably answer your question better. He'll be right up in this area here after the question and answer.
Okay. What is his name?
His name is Mike too.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Bye. Hi.
I'm number 20.
Okay.
And in the beginning, I was concerned that my home was going to be affected. But my other concern is the possibility of the lead and coal exit being eliminated, because that is the exit that I use to travel around town in any direction that I go. And that would increase the amount of time that I would have to travel to get to an on-ramp before I can go in any direction.
Okay.
If I wanted to go up to the Smiths, I would have to go, or for example, if I go to the mall, I catch that lead and coal exit. If I have to travel to Central, I would have to increase the time I'm going. And I understand, that you have to straighten it out, the S-curve, but if there's any possibility that you can do that without affecting that on-ramp, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your great questions and comments. We are going to be wrapping up the Q&A session. We will still have an open house format after this. We are going to open up a new station right here, which is going to show you those alternatives L and J a little bit closer up. So please come back as soon as we get this flipped and check those out. Again, thank you all for being here and have a great evening.